This episode of Dana Being Dana is brought to you in part by Dr. Lance Law and Dr. Mihaela Bogdanov at Comfort Care Family Dental.
Hello and welcome to Dana Being Dana. I'm Dana Michelle and I'm thrilled you're with us. My show is about all different aspects of the human connection, things that bring us together and living life intentionally. When it comes to parenting, you really never know what kind of parent you are until you become one. When done right, parenting is one of the most selfless things you can do in your life. Yet when it comes to divorce or a breakup involving children, parents often struggle with keeping the best interests of their children at the forefront of their interactions. Pride, ego, revenge, anger, disappointment, and the sheer desire to control an ex often cloud rational judgment, and otherwise great parents are reduced to selfishly treating their children as pawns. Co-parenting well is a skill developed over time. And joining me today is a former couple who seemingly have mastered this concept. They are the proud parents of 16-year-old twin boys, Mike and Marlo Gaal. How y'all doing?
Doing great.
Wonderful.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much for joining me, because I think this topic about co-parenting is something that so many people are struggling with nowadays. Divorce is on the rise, breakups are on the rise, and just struggling to maintain, an amicable relationship to be able to co-parent. So we want to know, let's cut to the chase. What is the secret to co-parenting well?
Yeah, there's no magic bullet, right? But I think first and foremost, you really have to drop your ego, right? You can't play the blame game, and you have to, own your part in whatever that dynamic is. So, the words are very easy to say, but it's definitely an intentional process that you have to engage in every step of the way.
The past is the past, right?
Past is the past.
Yep. Mike, what would you say? What's the secret?
There's no real secret. I think it's largely staying in your lane, right? Knowing what is your role, knowing that you're going to agree to disagree on a lot of things, but those aren't worth causing a stir over. Sometimes Marlo wants to do things one way, I want to do it another way, and maybe when they're with me, they do it my way, and with her, they do it her way, and that's how we live.
Well, let's go back a little bit and talk about your marriage. How long were you two married?
I always get it wrong, so you have to answer.
Oh, gosh. It depends on how you measure it, but I'd say about 12 years.
12 years?
Yeah.
Okay. Briefly tell us about your marriage and what that was like in the beginning.
It was great. I won't speak for Mike. Well, kind of. I believe we firmly signed up for forever. We loved each other for all the right reasons, whatever that means. And we built on that. Our families today are still very closely engaged because we started off with something really strong and powerful and true. So, it was great for a while.
And I think all marriages begin, kind of with those high hopes and that plan. And then for some reason or another, things change. Can you tell us a little bit about how things change? You described the end of your marriage as like the Cold War. So tell us what happened.
Yeah, I think like a lot of relationships, people change, right? So when we met, life was pretty easy. We both were in entry-level-ish sort of jobs, not a lot of financial responsibilities. You get married, you buy a house, you're advancing in your career. We had twin boys on our second anniversary.
Wow.
Your life is somewhat turned upside down. And I think over the course of time, we lost us with a focus on the boys. And so over the course of time, I'd say, to some degree, we probably stopped liking each other. We were focused on that co-parenting, even at that point, and got to the point at the end where it became like you mentioned, more of that Cold War situation where we were just roommates.
I appreciate you all saying that, because I think that is a very natural and understandable, relatable reason for why a lot of marriages end, to be honest. Growing apart, the stress of twins, right? Just kids in general, but twins, twin boys, can put a lot of stress and strain on your marriage. What was your marriage like when it came time to your divorce? How did the relationship end?
Wow. So we've talked about the Cold War, and thankfully it never got really heated,
Right.
but it's no less painful,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I think we both just got tired of just living with that void. It's like your ships sort of operating around each other, and it wasn't even conscious. It's like, if I'm in a room, he comes in, I leave, or vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
And, I think underneath it all, we both still at that time, and today, obviously, had a tremendous amount of respect for each other and just figure out on our own terms, like we have to do something else before we end up not liking each other, like really not liking each other.
Right.
And just having it turn ugly. I can speak for myself. I felt like it was on the verge of that. Like my health started suffering. I was in the ER having panic attacks, didn't know why. Everything else was seemingly healthy. And it's just, it's environmental.
Yeah.
So I think each of us in our own way figured out like we have to do something else.
So 12 years into your marriage, you ended up getting divorced. You wanted more out of life and in a partnership and in a marriage, and you both deserve that. You talked about how the work that it takes to co-parent well, right? You divorced, and I can appreciate the fact that there was no abuse in this marriage and other things that make it much more complicated for people to not co-parent well. But you talked about the work that it takes to co-parent. Can we talk a little bit about that? Tell me more about the work that it takes to co-parent, maybe how co-parenting was like in the beginning, and the kind of work that you had to do to get to where you are.
Yeah, I'd say, and I think it's different for everybody, right? So, I mean, for us, we settled on a schedule, right? And for the better part of the last 7 years, it's been Tuesday, Thursday, and every other weekend is my schedule, and Monday, Wednesday, and every other weekend is her schedule. And you've got to own your schedule, right? And you have to realize and prioritize, like the boys are the number one priority above all things. You have to give up social things. You have to plan around, even, we started in the beginning too. We planning around work, right? Like if I'm traveling for work or she's traveling for work, we're really good at trading, right? And understanding that, things are dynamic and the flow changes, and like you can't get upset about that. You just you pivot and you make it work.
And that's an important aspect that you said, talking about trading. So when one of you has to travel or has some sort of conflict, you support each other in that. So it's not about, getting back at one another or leaving somebody high and dry when it comes to the children. It's about having each other's back in that regard, because that's in the best interest of your kids, right?
Sure.
To be with either one of you over anyone else. Marlo, what would you say?
Yeah, I would agree with that. And, by all means, I don't want to make it seem like we're fully baked. We came out that way. I mean, it took us some time to get to that point.
Tell us about that.
Sure. There would be times where, if, I had a babysitter, usually my parents, and I decided to go out on, one of my weekends, I know that would sometimes bother Mike, because it's like, that's your time. But we work through it. I think, we have conversations about feeling judged or not wanting to be judged. And, he mentioned earlier, it's like, okay, but when they're here, this is how we do things. When we're, at his house, this is how we do things. And we find a middle ground, right? So, I want to stress that, again, it wasn't fully baked. Like, we've evolved to this point, thankfully, and we just go easy with each other now. And one thing I do want to say too is, before we got to the, co-parenting and the schedule and all of that, I know that I did work on myself, and I had time with a therapist. Mike also had time with a therapist. And I feel like that really prepared us for this next phase in life, because it forces you to think about like your part in the dynamic and how you can either make it better or make it worse. So when I say drop the ego, that took a lot to take that on.
I think that's
So
so
I'm
true.
thankful we both did that work. That's part of the work on our own.
And I think that's huge,
Yeah.
that self-work to make your partnership work all that more fruitful for your kids. You can
Absolutely.
be better yourself with the healing, because everybody going through a divorce has some healing work to do.
For sure.
Everyone plays a role in the demise of a relationship, but getting past that, doing that heart work, doing that healing work can make you show up better in a different way. So let's talk about moving on. Have you both moved on? Because I think that's part of the co-parenting, right? Sometimes people struggle with co-parenting because they haven't actually moved on, and they perhaps conflate the two, being married versus being co-parents. Have you both moved on, and does that impact your co-parenting?
Yeah. I mean, and moving on is not like a point in time either, right? Moving on, the boys were 9 when we first separated, and 10 then when we were divorced, and they're 16 now. And so, there's a long runway from age 10 through the end of high school and into college. And I think everyone has to view moving on differently. For me, I'm in a position now where they're a year and a half away from graduating high school, where moving on looks a lot different. I am moved on in another relationship where, I can now juggle those priorities. But for a long period of time, it was my number 1 and number 2 and number 3 priority was parenting, sports, school, and those sort of things. And so you can imagine that, trying to move on and date other people is very challenging during that period. It just, it doesn't really work well. I find it didn't work well for me when the boys were my priority.
Understood. Marlo?
Yeah, the moving on thing. Yeah, I'm in a relationship now. I think one of the things I appreciate when we talked about how that could work in the future, we made an agreement that, before anyone comes around our children, they have to meet us first. The reason that works well for us is because we have such a healthy family village. His family, my family, they all sort of intermingle. That's a lot for someone new to take on. Right. So we just want to be very clear about boundaries and roles. This is the mom, this is the dad. You're welcome to participate in the dynamic. Just stay in your lane and respect your position. And we've both been fortunate to find people who respect that position. For me, I was able to sort of separate, this is my home life. And while I figure out my dating life, I can find that balance, right? And, again, for me, it was critically important that I didn't bring anybody in the scenario who would disrupt this family dynamic, because that's my priority. People can come and go, but this family unit is forever. So it's important to me to make sure if I'm bringing anyone into this fold, they're going to be additive and not disruptive.
That's great.
So, that's where it is now.
Well, thank you both. Thank you, Marlo and Mike, for sharing your story. And I hope that it is inspirational to others on their own journey. Next, I will be joined by an expert who has turned her own co-parenting experience into a thriving career counseling others. We will have tips for us all on becoming better co-parents. Don't go away. We'll be right back.
Hello, I'm Dr. Lance Law, part of the husband and wife team at Comfort Care Family Dental. I'd like to be the first to welcome you to our office. We strive to make every visit a relaxing and stress-free experience. The desires and needs of you and your family will be our primary focus in delivering the quality dental treatment you deserve. We offer a wide array of dental services. You can relax and enjoy most procedures all at our convenient state-of-the-art facility. Your dental needs will be well explained, and all questions will be answered by our educated and well-trained team. We pride ourselves in making every patient part of our dental family. We strive to be the dental provider where you will be proud to refer your friends and loved ones. Please give us the opportunity to be your new dental home.
Stay in the know at home or on the go with NCTV 17 News Update. This quick recap of everything happening in and around town will be delivered straight to your email inbox for free. Sign up today.
Welcome back to Dana Being Dana. Joining me now is Rosalie Farnsworth, the founder of the Coparenting Collective, who has created a wonderful community focused on co-parenting well. Rosalie, thank you so much for joining me. You are incredible with what you're doing in the community and how you are inspiring people to be better co-parents. So
Thank you, Dana. Thank you. And thanks for having me.
Of course. So you watched Mike and Marlo in the earlier segment. What is this former couple doing right?
Right off the top, I mean, I've been co-parenting for 20 years and they have the big three. They've got acceptance, they've got flexibility, and they treat each other with decency. Like they still see each other as human beings. And that's huge. Those are the top three.
Repeat those again. I think those are great.
Acceptance, in meaning that you can see that they accepted that their relationship was over.
Right.
Now it's time to move forward.
And that's important.
Of course, major. A lot of people just don't get there.
They don't accept it.
So, no, they don't. They keep nitpicking and keep arguing and stewing in the past, which I heard you touch on as well. The second one is flexibility. So they seem like they're really flexible in that it benefits the kids so that their needs are never not met. Mm-hmm. You know, they are flexible with their schedules and working with each other, like they said, for swaps and things like that. So there's flexibility, which is, you know, super important if you want to get it right. Mm-hmm. And decency. Yeah. You know, they see each other. And like she said at the very, you know, she said she knows that this is her forever family and Mike has her back. And that's important. You know, that's important, not to treat each other like, take each other for granted and treat each other like cyborgs all of a sudden and just go off and do your thing. And, you know, like almost robotic. It doesn't feel good for anybody, you know?
And I think acceptance, decency, and flexibility. Yeah, I think those are so important and very critical. I think the acceptance piece is important to understand where you're at, you know, and grieve the loss of the marriage, and then what the co-parenting relationship can be, and being flexible in that, and just being kind to one another, being decent to one another. At one point, you made children together, and living into that, owning up to that. Now, you've been through your own co-parenting experiences. You said you've been co-parenting now for 20 years. What did your own personal experiences teach you, and how did you turn those into the Co-Parenting Collective?
Okay, so 20 years, and I got to boil it down to a sentence. Let me see.
Go.
Well, I think, you know, what it taught me is that first of all, I made the right decision. So that's one of the big things, right? When you get divorced, you're just like, did I make the right decision? Did I just screw up everything and my child's whole life? But as time went on, it really came full circle that it was the right decision. And that's a big lesson to learn, and just be okay with everything and focused on your child. And, you know, not for nothing, I think it made me a better mother.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have the weight of a toxic relationship to distract me from memories or taint memories, or, you know, just be disruptive to being a mom.
One thing right. And one thing I like, and I'm a divorced single parent too, in the sense that you create the opportunity for your children to see you being loved well and treated right. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people who stay in situations that are not good for them, once, like you said, it takes the focus away from being a good parent, but kids are watching and they see these examples. And I think it's important for kids to see both parents being treated well, being loved right, and navigating what that looks like. During the holidays, I think is an especially challenging time for co-parenting. I think people can get inflexible, if we've talked about some of the things people are doing well during the holidays, and a lot of things happen and go wrong and stuff during the holidays. What advice do you have for people to co-parent well during the holidays of any season?
I would definitely the flexibility. I'm going to tell you a quick story. When my son was about, I think he was about 7 or 8 years old. And at that point, we had been co-parenting for 5 years or so. I got so sick one Christmas. I mean, I couldn't even get out of bed, but it was my Christmas and I was supposed to have him. And I wasn't remarried or didn't have, another partner in the house at the time. So, it was just me and my son. And that was that. So long story short, his dad ended up taking care of everything, like getting all the presents, taking care of, picking up he actually had some vacation plans. He canceled them and brought my son to me so that, but took him so I could get rest and get better. And that flexibility really saved. Can you imagine if he just was like, it's like Red Rover, send the kid over, he sends him over. I'm in bed, getting sick and taking medicine and can't sleep and all these things. And what is my son supposed to do? Just sit there and stare at me? So that flexibility, you got to think about those things. That flexibility is so super critical. Anything can happen at any time.
I agree. And I think it also works in the reverse too, meaning that like everything is not necessarily going to be perfect. I heard a story once of someone during the holidays not having food prepared on time for Thanksgiving. How many times do you set a time to eat a meal during the holidays? And for one reason or another, things get delayed. And she was heartbroken because her ex was like, nope, I'm getting the child at 3, and so the child didn't even get to eat with the first family. And I think it's tough personally splitting the day up for the children because they're kind of going back and forth. But
I agree with that completely.
Yeah, I think alternating perhaps holidays as opposed to splitting the holidays in the middle allows people to move on and allows the child to kind of be fully immersed in one atmosphere for that day and then the next year with the next family and whatnot. But to each his own.
So the holidays are funny. So we think that we can only do the thing on the one day. But the reality is that your kids have a week off of school. Yeah. Okay. So if it happens, if you eat the turkey on the Friday, you shouldn't be beating yourself up. Like no one, honestly, I'm 20 years removed from that first day, taking the first step towards co-parenting. But I can tell you, all that kind of stuff that you get stuck on at the beginning, I've moved through it. I've raised a whole human. None of it matters. Yeah. And I want people to know that it doesn't matter.
Yep. It doesn't have to be that day. You can still create wonderful memories, the next day, the day before. And the beauty of separation or moving on is that you can create the holidays and traditions that are your own in the ways that you want, in the ways that feel good to you. Do what you all enjoy doing and creating that nuclear group. But some people are stuck.
It doesn't have to be rigid.
It doesn't have to be rigid.
That's our whole message here. It just doesn't.
Exactly.
And let me tell you, the work that I do, I actually work with kids that are divorced, like teenagers will contact me. And that is the number one complaint is the rigidity. Yeah. Especially when they're getting older and they want a little more independence and a little more freedom, and they've got their friends now and, extracurriculars. Yeah, that's what ends up causing a lot of friction because the kids are like, they don't want to step on anyone's toes. They want their kids they want to be available to their parents, but they're also growing up in the middle of it. Yeah. So, the holidays can really put a lot of pressure on our children unnecessarily.
Agreed. And I think it's not personal. So sometimes it's not. The kids just want to be with their friends or they want to be in something that's more familiar to them. And it's not preferring a parent over the other. But some people are stuck. What advice do you have for people who are stuck and or who find it impossible to co-parent with an ex?
So anyone, if it's impossible, you know that it's really impossible. Like, let's say, you know, one of my clients pops to my head, and she has done nothing but bend over backwards to have her ex in her son's life, but he is so closed off, walled off behind that wall that like parallel parenting builds. And literally it's like, send the kid over the wall and then whatever happens. But it's impossible for her. Okay. Not because of her mindset. It is literally impossible. Her ex is not budging, has moved on. The wife isn't down for co-parenting, doesn't support it. So it's the two of them against her. And so she has accepted that. But I think people who think that it's impossible, that's a rare case. But I think people who think that it's impossible just aren't surrounded by the right information or the right people.
Right.
And what we listen to is who we are. And we have to make sure that there's a voice of reason in there somewhere.
That part.
That part. So you have to ask yourself, if you feel like it's impossible, you have to ask yourself, is it really impossible? Right. Take a look at your sister situation. Is it really impossible? Or are you looking at it from the mindset of it being impossible? Because I find that a lot of people, when I tweak their mindset a little bit, they sail off into happily even after.
That's right. That mindset is everything. And that mindset tweak can make such a difference. If you don't have to be stubborn, and you can grow. We all have growing opportunities.
We do.
Thank you so much, Rosalie, for joining me.
You're welcome.
You are incredible. It can be devastating after the end of a relationship involving kids for people who once shared everything to pick up the pieces and move forward in co-parenting. Again, good parenting is selfless, and getting co-parenting right takes a lot of humility, priority of children, and forgiveness. While your breakup may not have been planned, that is not the fault of your children. Everyone deserves to move on in peaceful and healthy ways, because when exes are able to co-parent effectively, everyone wins, and your children deserve that. Thank you to my guests for sharing your stories, advice, and tips. And thanks to Comfort Care Family Dental for the smiles they keep. Hopefully you have been entertained, if not encouraged or inspired. I do not promise to be an expert, nor do I have all the answers. I'm just Dana being Dana. See you next time.
This episode of Dana Being Dana is brought to you in part by Dr. Lance Law and Dr. Mihaela Bogdanoff at Comfort Care Family Dental.